Good afternoon. I'm Dan Montez from the CU President's Office. Welcome to the pre-submission webinar for the 2022 Boettcher Webb-Waring Biomedical Research Awards Program. We are joined today by the chair of the selection panel, Dr. Ronald Sokol. Today's webinar will include an overview of the program, who is eligible to apply, the application process, tips for completing your application, and other key resources you may need. And we'll also end with an opportunity for some Q&A with Dr. Sokol. You can submit questions by clicking on the Q&A icon, entering your question and selecting send on the Q&A screen, and you have the option of including your name or just sending it anonymously. We'll go through the submitted questions during the Q&A period at the end of the presentation. I'll now turn this over to Dr. Ron Sokol for an overview of the program.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome to all of those who are participating today. I'm going to give you an overview and discuss some important items about eligibility and how to apply for the program. So this program will award in 2022 5 grants of $235,000, which can be used for up to 3 years of research activity. So the total is $235,000, not an annual $235,000. And this is awarded to promising and talented early career investigators at the University of Colorado. The awardees will receive the title, which is quite prestigious, of a Boettcher investigator. Eligible faculty researchers from all of the CU campuses, that is Boulder, downtown Denver, Colorado Springs, and the Anschutz Medical Campus, all of them are eligible and encouraged to apply as long as they meet the eligibility criteria. And this is a website here that you should write down if you need to get more information, although you can easily Google Boettcher Foundation Webb-Waring grants at CU and find this website. Next slide. So to be eligible, you must meet 4 criteria. The first is to be within 4 years of your first appointment to a career track academic position. And that means that the career track appointment must have begun on or after January 1st, 2017. Now, you may say, well, it's already after that's 3 years if I apply in 2022, but the timeline is actually based on the year that the program was announced, which was 2021, the year we're in. So again, January 1st, 2017 is the cutoff date for your first academic career track appointment. Now, in general, these are faculty appointments that have a significant expectation regarding research because this is a research and career development award, but the appointment can also include teaching and or clinical activities. So at the University of Colorado, the eligible faculty titles for this award are either tenure or tenure track or tenure track eligible faculty who are assistant professors and sometimes associate professors if they were promoted very early in their career. For research faculty, again, the faculty titles are either research assistant professor or research associate professor. I should say for the research professor series, those are the titles. So you'll notice that instructor and senior instructors are not eligible for this award. The second criteria, and this is very important, that you must not have previously received a major independent research award, which means that at the time of application, so when you submit this early in 2022, and at the time of selection, So when before the awards are announced in May, we will check once again and make sure you have not yet received an independent large research award. Now, this major independent award includes NIH R01s or similar grants from other funding agencies, could be AHRQ, could be Department of Defense, etc., or a similar grant. And just for those who are going to ask, we include K99 R00 grants in this category that would make you ineligible. Now, the size of the grant is important because any grant that provides independent research support of at least $125,000 direct costs per year would make you ineligible. And this can be just a single year grant for $125,000 or multiple year award for $125,000 per year. So you can apply if you've received multiple smaller independent awards that are each less than $125,000 of direct costs, but they could total more than $125,000. So that number is the hard cutoff for your eligibility. Very important, you may apply if you have a training grant, if you have your own K award, if you have a mentored grant, or if you have other career development grants from other organizations, as long as the direct costs are less than $125,000 per year. Next. The third criteria is you must have received your terminal degree or completed your residency training. And we say medical, but that includes surgical, pediatrics, anesthesia. You must have completed your medical residency within the 10 years preceding the application. And again, this means you must have received your degree or completed your residency on or after January 1st, 2011. Again, it's the year that this announcement is being made in 2021. That's why the date is January 1st, 2011. And finally, the Boettcher Foundation requires you to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident at the time that you submit the application. The time you submit the application, not the time of the award. So those are the four criteria. All of them must be met. Next. There you go. You must meet all four criteria. And before you spend time filling out and writing the application, you should really determine your eligibility before you do this. And you should be able to do this by just looking carefully at the criteria. If there's any question about it, you can contact the information number that's on the website, and eventually your own chancellor at your campus will have to sign off that you are eligible. Your department chair will be responsible for signing the eligibility certification and verification office form, and this will then be screened by the vice chancellor research office at each of your campus to make sure you're eligible, so you don't go through this process and find out that you're not eligible. Next slide. So there's a few items I wanted to stress. First of all, and you will hear more of this in the video that Dr. Andrew Thorburn made last year, but all of these aspects about the grant are the same. But here's four items to remember. First of all, your career plan is extremely important in this criteria. This grant is a career development grant, but also a scientific project grant. So you must have a career plan. Your department commitment is also very important. That is that your department is providing you with protected time, with space, with needed startup funds, etc. You should also find ways in your application to stress how this grant will help you progress to an independent research career. Accelerating your current career development is one way to look at this. And where this can be mentioned, not only in your personal statement, but your mentor's letter, and your department chair's commitment letter should clearly state these items. You should also know that NIH has changed their BioSketch template as of January of 2022. I think you may all be familiar with that. The Boettcher Foundation did not change the template. So please use the old NIH BioSketch template that you can still find on the NIH website if you need, but this is probably the format that you have used up until now, and this will be included in the application. So you don't have to use the new NIH template. Next. So application process and tips, and I think we're going to turn it over to Andrew Thorburn at this stage to give you more information.
Okay, thank you, Ron. First, a disclaimer, many of the things that I'm going to suggest to you are going to apply to every grant that you submit in your career. However, some of these things are going to be somewhat selective and specific for this application. So, general tips. Please follow the instructions on the website. In the application package, there are pretty specific instructions. Please follow those instructions. We suggest very strongly that you treat this very similarly to a grant that you apply for through an agency like the NIH. You should use Arial 11 font, and somewhat different from the rules for federal grants from the NIH, we require that you have 1-inch margins. It's not such a good idea to use fancy formatting, for example, to make 2 columns or anything else that may make it difficult for a reviewer to read either on paper or on a screen. And remember, many of our reviewers review your grant based on a PDF that they're reading on their iPad. Next slide, please. The components of the application include the following. A cover letter from you. This should explain the goals of your research in a way that is suitable for a lay audience. Now remember that this research is health related and it has to be relevant for human health. We are going to potentially use the information and the text from your cover letter to talk to the Boettcher Foundation and other agencies about this. And so please make that suitable for a lay audience. Section 1 has a section where we ask you for the relevance to human health. Again, this should include lay terms and clearly explain the health relevance of the research. Section 2 has a scientific abstract. This should be a more detailed technical document that includes a real good summary of why you're doing the research, what you expect to find, and we strongly suggest that you include your specific aims explicitly in that scientific abstract. The reviewers will look at that early on, and Ron and I may use that information to assign reviewers to your particular grant. Section 3 has the investigator information. Please follow the BioSketch template, which is similar to, but not exactly the same as the standard NIH template. We strongly suggest that you remember that the personal statement section is your opportunity to explain why you're the best person in the history of the world to do this particular research. Don't just gloss over that piece. That's going to be read by your reviewers. You also want to use this area to explain to the reader how your project fits into your field. And then finally, in that personal statement section, it would be helpful if you would explain how this award will help you become an independent investigator. There's a career plan section that in the investigator information. This is an important criteria. We will ask the reviewers to review your career plan. So provide the reviewers with information that will be helpful to them to be persuaded that your career plan is going to be on track if you get this award. Next slide, please, Jim. The research plan has 6-page limit. The reviewers expect to see a grant that looks like an NIH type grant. So you should have clearly defined specific aims. You should include a background and significance section. This section should explain the health relevance as well as the scientific impact of the work. And this is your opportunity and the optimal place to establish the scientific rationale and the premise that underlie your proposal, and to persuade us that that is sound. It's helpful additionally to describe innovative aspects of your work here. The reviewers are likely to reward innovation, and if you can explain that, that's good. The approach should provide a specific plan that will include research design and methods, and the reader needs sufficient detail to understand what you're doing. And here it's important to remember that although all the reviewers are accomplished experts, they may not be experts in your specific field. So if you're a cardiovascular investigator, you may be getting reviewed, one of your reviewers may be a neuroscientist or a cancer biologist or a mathematician. You should explain what you're going to do in a way that an intelligent, experienced reviewer who is not in your specific field will understand what you're doing. Preliminary data is allowed, it's not necessary, but if it's available, we would strongly suggest that you provide it, for example, to establish feasibility of what you propose to do. If the project is going to develop pilot data that you expect will lead to future studies, you want to explain why that's valuable and what will be done with those data. You want to include in your approach section statistical justifications such as power analyses, and explain how data will be analyzed. You also need to justify the feasibility and numbers for any animal or human studies. And so, for example, if you're intending to carry out experiments using human subjects, this is the place where you should establish the feasibility of attaining the accrual numbers that you would need for your study. We will be looking for that information. Next slide, please. Our suggestion is that for the research plan to establish feasibility, you should ask yourself, have you shown that it's possible to do this? And then secondarily, can you do it with the expertise and facilities that you specifically have? We suggest you include an expected results section and discussion of potential pitfalls and alternative approaches. A timeline is optional, but that's often helpful, and many reviewers appreciate seeing how that's going to work out. It's particularly important if there's any question as to whether you could achieve this goal in the timeline that you will have. References are not included in the 6 pages, and we request that there are no more than 50 of them. The references are going to be part of the review. And it's useful that you use them to demonstrate your knowledge of the literature and your capabilities. It's helpful if it's relevant to cite your own previous work. And if you do that, we suggest you make it clear to the reader that this is your previous work. Do not ignore important relevant studies, especially if they raise doubts about your work. So that's true in all grants. Next slide, please. The budget section, section 5, is a 2-page maximum. break that up into components as in the instructions, and explain how the budget supports your research plan in the budget justification. You don't need to give us the price of pipette tips, but you should justify your expenditures on a category basis for how you're going to spend the money. There are several assurances that are needed. You need to sign your form, and then the campus assurance form signed by others, including your department chair, need to be included. We ask for a maximum of 4 letters of recommendation. One of those should be from your department chair or division chief. And as Ron mentioned, that should include a description of your department's commitment to your research program, such as equipment, space, protected time, startup funds, etc. We realize that sometimes it can be a little bit delicate to go to your boss and say, this is what needs to be put in the letter, but you really do need to do that because some department chairs and division chiefs do not fully understand what we're looking for in those letters. We require that there be 1 letter from your mentor or advisor. So every junior faculty member at the University of Colorado has an official faculty mentor. So normally that would be that person, but either that person who's been formally appointed by your department chair or a similar mentor in the department or in a related department who should attest to your promise and abilities. And then we ask for 1 to 2 letters from researchers outside your institution who can address the merits of your science. In some cases, this could be someone, including your PhD mentor from previous institution that you worked at. But in many cases, it's best if this is a person in your field who knows your work and knows your promise and can legitimately argue for your promise as an investigator in your particular field. It's really better if these people can make it clear that they know you and are familiar with your research. So the ideal person is someone who you're familiar with at another institution who's an expert in your field. And a maximum of 4 letters will be accepted. Next slide, please. So some of these hints are pretty obvious and are true for every grant, but we strongly suggest that you have a mentor or another experienced grant awardee and a person who's experienced at reviewing grants to read your proposal. What that means in reality is that you need to get your proposal ready early enough before the deadline that that person has time to do that. As I mentioned, you should not assume that the reviewers will be experts in your specific field, but you should realize that all of our reviewers are accomplished and successful researchers, and all of them are experienced at reading and reviewing research proposals. But because they may not be an expert in your particular field, it's really important that you remember that the reviewer needs to have the background biology perhaps explained to them in ways that you might not if you were going to a group of reviewers who know exactly what you're going to do. Many of our proposals are hypothesis driven, and we suggest that in that case you make it clear how the work that you're going to do will test the hypothesis. However, if your work is not really hypothesis driven, if it's discovery research or other non-hypothesis driven research, you should explain how generating these data will actually move the field forward.
Thank you to Dr. Thornburg, last year's vice chair, for this great information. While this video is from last year's webinar, as Dr. Sokol said, is still very much applicable to this year's program. Okay, so you've heard about the program, who is eligible to apply, the application process, and tips for completing the application. So where do you go from here? All the information and application materials you need are available on the BFWW webpage, including quick links on the left side for information about the grant, eligibility, and how to apply. When you select how to apply, you will get access to the campus-specific instructions and deadlines, the application components, including forms and templates for the application, for the eligibility certification, the BioSketch template, and campus assurances. You will also find a list of FAQs on the second tab on this page. Lastly, a list of campus contacts is also provided in the campus-specific instructions. So with that, it's time to bring Ron back for some Q&A. If you haven't already done so, please submit your questions. If we run out of time and didn't get to your questions, we will continue to process those, and we'll send out answers to everyone via email. With that, Ron, here is your first question. Is there any preference regarding basic science versus clinical sciences or clinical studies?
And that really is a great question. This is a program that attempts to fund the best science that will eventually improve human health, so-called translational science. Many of the applications that get funded are basic science that may have a direct or indirect application to a human condition. In general, these have a justification of a disease or a process in human health that they directly affect. However, also applications that have been approved are clinical science applications, and these are generally applications that use some translational discovery and try to then apply it to humans. Occasionally, the entire application is a clinical research study that addresses an important human issue. So any of these are eligible. We find reviewers for the clinically oriented science that are clinical scientists. We find reviewers for the basic science or preclinical science research that are basic and preclinical scientists. So I would encourage all of you to apply, whether you're more clinically, scientifically oriented or basic science.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If my department chair is also my mentor, should they submit one letter or two? And
So
I think this may have been covered a little bit in the presentation.
Yes, what's very important, if your mentor is your department chair, to either have them submit 2 letters or make it very clear in the letter that they are writing as both your mentor and your department chair, and they need to address in that letter all of the criteria that were laid out for those as 2 separate letters. So they can either submit 2 separate letters, or it may be more convenient to write 1 letter, but they should clearly delineate the criteria, which are the mentor's criteria versus the department chair commitment criteria.
Okay. Next question. What is the maximum length of reference letters?
I don't believe we actually have a page limit, but what I could tell you that 2 to 3 pages should suffice. Remember, the reviewers have to review your entire application, and we don't want to see 8-page letters of reference. So I would think that a letter up to 2 to 3 pages should suffice.
Okay. A clarification about career development award funding. They often end up being greater than $125,000 in direct costs per year. with salary support plus fringe benefits plus science budgets. If you are on a K-8 with direct costs more than $125,000 per year, does that make you ineligible for this award?
So once again, most of the K awards do not allow you to go up to $125,000. It's usually just short of that number. And this is a number that's frequently used by the NIH to determine early investigator status. If somebody is right on the borderline, I suggest you submit a question on the website about your eligibility, and we will answer it quickly. Is there a specific, Dan, is there a specific address that they should send those type of questions to, or is it just the one on the website?
Yeah, it will be at the Webb-Waring, and we'll put that in the answer to everyone. Okay, next question. Is data collection necessary, or can we use existing NIH data sets? If so, does letter of support for accessing the data set going to be part of the maximum 4 letters of support we can upload?
So there's no limit to what data you can use. And I think maybe what they're asking is, can they use public data sets and then analyze that data? If they need permission to access that data set, then it would be important to include a letter, and that letter with permission. It would also be helpful if that letter described the value of your research project. Frequently, if you need to get permission, you will need to submit something that proves the value of your research project. So that should be included in those 4 letters, but hopefully that letter can state more than just a simple permission that you can use the data.
Okay. I think we also answered this directly, but we had the question, how many applications are typically submitted for the awards? I think we average around 33 submissions per year. Does that sound about right, Ron?
Yes, usually somewhere in the 25 to 40 range, but usually averages in the 30s. So you can do the math in terms of the percent that we fund.
Okay. Another kind of related question, are the number of CU awards, which I think we said is 5, are they limited to a specific campus, or can they all go to the same campus?
Yeah, that's another great question. So the applications are judged based on the person, their science, the support that they receive, their outside letters, and not based on the campus. So we do not have an allocation scheme where 3 go to this campus, 2 to this campus, 1 to that campus. Theoretically, they could all be on the same campus. I'll tell you that rarely occurs, but theoretically, they could all be on the same campus.
Okay. There's a couple on here that I think are specific on eligibility that we may have them submit to Webb-Waring, and we'll work directly with them on those. Another question here regarding collaborators. How are collaborators viewed? If I'm leading the work, but a collaborator is required for a key component of the test or evaluation in an important application, would that be viewed unfavorably?
Well, team science is viewed very favorably. And if there is a collaborator that has a unique talent that adds to your application, that's perfectly acceptable. I think you need to keep in mind, though, that we are funding you as a potential independent investigator. So having collaborators is just fine. But if the collaborators' input and what they add to the study is really the main part of the study, then this could actually weaken your application. But again, having collaborators that offer something unique that helps with your science is certainly encouraged. And nowadays, most people who are performing research in biomedically related research have many collaborators. So again, that could only strengthen your application as long as that isn't the main thrust of the application, which then makes you look weakened as unlikely to become an independent investigator.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what is the percentage research time that is expected for a successful candidate?
Well, in general, we look for a substantial amount of protected time. And as you all know, for most junior investigators who get K awards, NIH requires 75% protected time. And that would be the range that we are expecting to see. But Boettcher Foundation and Webb-Waring, they do not have a specific percent of protected time. NIH also allows surgeons on a career development award to have down to 50% protected time for the research. So I would stay within those ranges to be competitive.
Okay, thank you. Next question, if you don't receive the award this year, can you reapply again in future years? And also, will you be able to receive the reviewer comments after the selection?
Yeah, great. Two really good questions. First of all, as long as you still meet the eligibility requirements, you can resubmit in subsequent years. But remember, there's really only a 4-year period for your first faculty appointment. But during those 4 years, you can certainly resubmit. What was the second part of the question, Dan?
The second part is, also, will you be able to receive the reviewer comments?
Oh, yes, and reviewer comments will be sent to you, and the review is done in a standard NIH format. So any of you who are used to seeing what an NIH summary statement looks like, we review the applications with similar criteria, and you will get a bulleted list of comments to help you for future applications.
Great. Next question. How many applications are screened first and ultimately chosen to be sent to the foundation for consideration?
So we review every application that is submitted. Every application is reviewed by 3 reviewers, and then we hold a study section. And similar to NIH, we will review the lower half, meaning the best scores, generally roughly about half or 2/3 of the applications we will discuss during our study section. And then during our review session, we will decide on who the 5 finalists are for CU. Those names then will get sent to the Boettcher Foundation, and they have always accepted our 5 recommendations, and those would be the people that would get funded.
Okay. Here's one question on eligibility. Does eligibility date from training go to residency or subspecialty fellowship training date?
Yeah, so it's generally considered residency. If there's some extenuating circumstances, we would want to know about that. But most residents may have a fellowship for 3 or 4 years, which then still leaves 6 years' time before you would need to have your first faculty appointment and still be eligible for this award. So it's really at the end of your residency when the 10-year clock starts.
Okay. What about receiving private gift funds for research in excess of $125,000 per year? Again, not a competitive research award, but it is for research support.
Well, that's a very good question, and I would turn that over to Dan
Yeah,
and have the vice chancellor on that campus make a decision. If this was really a very large gift, I would assume that you would be ineligible, but I would have to have the campus decide on that.
yep. We will do that with this person. What about participation in industry-sponsored clinical trials?
Well, once again, if you received a grant of $125,000 per year of direct cost, and most industry-sponsored trials are not $125,000 per year, but if you are the principal investigator and receive that grant, then you should be considered ineligible.
Okay. Next question. Is a tenure track early career investigator more likely to get the award than a non-tenure research track early career investigator?
Well, first, let me say, we are generally unaware whether somebody is tenure track or non-tenure track unless it's in their department chair letter. And once again, we look over the person very carefully, their past training, their track record, their publications, their personal statement, the letters from outside, and try to assess each individual as to their potential to become an independent investigator. And on top of that, we look at the science they're proposing. And that's really what we make the decision on, not exactly what their appointment is.
Okay. Do startups in excess of $125,000 a year affect eligibility?
So your startup package is not included in the grant support. So you can have a startup package and hopefully it would be more than $125,000. But that is not included in the requirement that you have to have less than $125,000 per year of direct costs in a single grant.
Okay. Can you speak to the importance of prior publications or preliminary data in the area of the proposed research?
So one way that we can judge the potential of each applicant to become an independent investigator is to look at their prior publications, the type of journals, the science that they've published, particularly, is that science related to the current application? So that is very important to put your best foot forward and to list your best publications. So that is taken into account.
Okay. After you receive the award, are there any requirements for grant follow-up, such as progress reports or presentation at a grant foundation meeting?
Dan, I'll let you answer that.
Yes, and I think this will be a requirement. They'll have progress reports that they'll do directly to the Boettcher Foundation. And I think all that will be specified in the Boettcher instructions manual that is available on the website.
And there may be times when you're asked to present at some annual events that the Boettcher Foundation puts on. So, and as Dan said, that information should be in the brochure of what your responsibilities are if you're awarded the Boettcher grant. I could tell you that the prior awardees are generally thrilled to be invited to speak at some of these very nice events where your research and your career development will be emphasized. So everything is done in very good taste. And again, it's really an honor to be asked to present at those. And there is an annual progress report that is not onerous at all. And after you complete the 3 years, the Boettcher Foundation also wants to follow up with you and find out how their investment in you has helped with your career.
Okay. Are there any rules for what percentage of the budget needs to go to specific areas such as salary, staff, or supplies?
Yeah, there's no rules at all. So we suggest that you put the budget together, showing that this money can be used to move your research forward faster, accelerate it, and you need to justify each of the budget items. That's the most important part, is to justify how are you going to use this $225,000.
Okay. In terms of an application, how do you weigh the potential of the applicant versus the science proposed in the proposal?
Well, that's a very good question. This comes up all the time at our review sessions. And we try to just get an overall gestalt about the potential, once again, of the investigator, their commitment, et cetera, and then take into account the science that they're proposing. There is no formula. It is not 50% science, 50% investigator. And I can tell you that the review sessions take many hours. Each person is thoroughly discussed. And I think at the end of each year, the review group feels that the correct 5 people have been funded. So there is no magic formula, but this, I want you to know that you really need to put your best foot forward and explain your science, explain your career plans, and convince us that you are one of the 5 people to receive the award.
Okay. And also, if publications are being prepared, where should that be indicated in the application?
Well, your bio sketch is, I'm not sure what it means, publications being prepared. So, generally in a bio sketch, if you have a publication that's in press, meaning it's accepted for publication, and it is not under revision, then including that in your bio sketch is perfectly fine. But if you have manuscripts in preparation, that never helps putting that in a bio sketch. As a matter of fact, sometimes it weakens your bio sketch. You can certainly mention in your preliminary data section that the experiments that you're describing are currently being prepared for a manuscript for publication. But we don't want to see a bio sketch where everything listed says in preparation.
Okay. Does the grant include indirects?
Dan, I believe there are no indirects with this grant, correct?
I need to confirm that, but we will send that answer out via email. We just want to make sure we get that answer right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's no indirects, but we will get that to you.
Okay. Next question, does the support need to be spread out evenly over the 3 years, or even last the complete 3 years?
Great question. So the support does not need to be spread out evenly. Once again, justify why you need more money in 1 year versus the others. And you saw, I was careful to say that this is an award up to 3 years. So theoretically, you could ask for a 2-year grant. I will tell you, almost all the applications are for a 3-year award. So if you would ask to use the funds and spend them in 2 years, you should have really an outstanding justification for why you can do all of this science in 2 years. The intent is to fund individuals for 3 years, but that's not a hard and fast rule.
Okay. If you receive an R01 award prior to finishing this 3-year period, do you get to keep the remaining money from the Boettcher award?
Yes. So once you get the award, then everybody's very happy if you get independent funding, but you cannot have it before the final day when the Boettcher Foundation approves our recommendation. So if you've got an R01 the week before, then we go down the list and the next person is going to get funded.
Okay, hold on here.
And Dan, I believe this is the notice of grant award that is the actual action that would make you ineligible, not getting a score from a study section or being asked for just-in-time information. It's actually getting a notice of grant award before those deadlines.
Okay, we're just waiting on any last questions here. And one thing I will say is a couple of the questions that came in that are real specific on eligibility, we're probably going to work with that person to get those answers, whether we have to work with the campus or the Boettcher Foundation. We want to make sure we get those questions nailed down.
Yeah, I did want to mention that 10-year rule and the 4-year rule, that is 4 years of your first academic appointment and 10 years since your terminal degree or your residency. If there are extenuating family circumstances, such as somebody needed to go out on FMLA or maternity leave or paternity leave or other extenuating circumstances, these are reasons for you to contact us to work through this with you, because generally those are acceptable to extend the 10 and 4-year rule. Certainly NIH will do that, and we would like to think that we will comply with whatever NIH is doing with young investigators.
Okay. Next question, what is the earliest start date for the period of performance?
Dan, do you have that start date?
Well, if this means when they first get funding, they've now pushed that up to June 1st of 2022. Is that you think what they're asking?
Yeah, they're asking, and the start date would be when you get the notice of grant award and the money's available. So it would be June 1st. I think you could also put a July 1st date if you wanted to. They're not going to cut back the funding if you're off by a month, but it sounds like June 1st would be just fine.
Okay. Question is, are there research priorities that the award is interested in?
There is no specific research priority other than great scientific achievement that will eventually lead to improved human health.
Okay, let's see if we have any last minute questions. And I don't see any more here. And I think we're kind of reached our time period anyway. We'll keep an eye on that. So as we're nearing the end of our time, I wanted to thank Dr. Sokol for his time today. And see if Ron has any final words of advice or thoughts to share with you.
Well, first of all, thank you for those questions and for your attention. Those really are great questions. On the website, you will see an FAQ that will answer all of those and other questions that we've received in prior years. So please reach out if you have any specific questions, and we look forward to reviewing your applications.
Great, thank you. And we want to thank you all for your interest in the program and for participating today. And as you can see on this screen, there will be a recording of the webinar today, along with the slides that will be posted to the BFWW website. We're also, as you sign off, you'll get access to a survey. So if you have a few minutes, we would love to get your feedback on the webinar today. And with that, that concludes the webinar. Thank you very much and best of luck.